Alucard's podcast. Listen in.
Alucard's fantasy podcast.
So the Brothers Krynn, you're saying you had a serious health scare and you had to go into recovery for a little while, and that fortunately only deepened your connection to fantasy and, you know, got you through and you got to work on your writing and stuff. Tell me, I'd love to hear about that.
Well, what happened is that well, for one thing, I think it was pretty psychological in a lot of ways. It started off when I first found out about the whole World Economic Forum and a bunch of other stuff like that. Kind of scared me. And then shortly afterwards, I ended up deciding I'd go to teach abroad. That didn't, well, you know, you're in and out of the country for a while and there's some stresses. And then I decided I wouldn't go. Then I had a health scare in that I had a seizure all of a sudden. I fell over, I hit my head, and I ended up just suddenly just in and out. And like for a while, I struggled to keep things down, lost a little weight, and I had to get some tests done. I had to go to the hospital. Flying overseas was a little harder, so you can't do that as much. And like they didn't know if it was anything permanent or something, so I got a bit of a health scare. There was all sorts of diagnoses running around, and around that time I decided je vais tout jeter. Like I started working as a janitor. I decided I'll just throw it all into fantasy. I wanted to write a trilogy or a grand novel a la Lord of the Rings. So I decided I'd throw it all into a grand novel. I just write the story I always wanted to write, Brotherhood of the Gemstone. And I also always wanted to develop a mythology to a French mythology for myself. So bear in mind, I'm sometimes in and out of the hospital. I'm having to get tests done. I don't, like one minute they think it's my heart. The next minute, it might be my brain. It might be psychological. It might not be. So you're living with this for like not weeks, but months. And your entire career is focused on teaching abroad and you can't travel. So, I'm in and out of work and I'm in and out of the hospital. So life's kind of hard. I go back to school, of course, and I'm writing over the course of 3 months, Brotherhood of the Gemstone in 2023, thereabouts. And the novel was written, has about 1,000 pages, written in 3 months. And by the end of it, I was so utterly exhausted, emotionally and spiritually. It felt like a part of my very soul was poured into the book, and I don't know what. Wow. By the end of the book, I realized, son of a, it's like there's 1,000 pages to encompass everything, and I realized it's a cliffhanger, and well, I could just continue going on. So I continue going on for another 700 pages, and then I go, this thing is way too long. It's at 1,700 pages. I had written several 1,500 to 1,200 page books, like 12 to 1,500 pages before, all in French. And I went, I don't want to write novels which are like 1,200 pages or 2,500 pages like I did in French. So of course it has to be broken up. And the first book is 1,000 pages. The second book is about 700 pages or something. Book number 3 is hopefully only going to be 500 pages or something. I've outlined it, but I haven't written it yet. But the health scare has lasted for a few years. Then I finally got a final diagnosis earlier this year, which stated I have a clean bill of health. It was just a one-off. You're 32 years old or something. Some 32-year-olds get a sudden seizure, and some doctors had overblown it. Then they put me on meds that didn't help, and but since then I've been healthier, and life crapped out on a lot of things. Like I had 2 relationships that were really, I had hopes up. The girls didn't want to deal with the health crisis, so they dumped me.
That's rough.
One of them even dumped me with her debt. So it's like, oof. So you have all this, her debt.
With the debt. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that was nice of her. That was really sweet. I didn't appreciate that last gift. But, it's something which kind of changes how you look at the world. When you're like, well, I could die. Well, I don't want to die. And you kind of then have to start dealing with the stress, the emotions, and the best outlet is fantasy. And I wanted to write a grand, sweeping narrative, and I wrote it. And I'm still having to write the damn thing. But yeah, that's the whole story.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, about the health scare. But I do think it's impressive that you use that to then fulfill your fantasy, dreams and write this massive, like, that's a very prolific novel, it's actually 3 novels. So that's a really good use of this situation.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of others. To be quite honest, a lot of what's been on Substack has just been, well, what would people like us to write to an extent, and what would we like to write, and kind of meeting it in the middle. But
right.
Some stories, like Prince of Flames was like that. Baron Cub was purely Dan going, I want to write this. I really want to write a story like this. And, which was basically the Anglo-Saxon conquest of England. And Dan wanted to write that. So we wrote that for us. And Darkspire Conspiracy was, was conceptualized because I wasn't sure I was ready to give people Brother of the Gemstone. So I hurriedly wrote Darkspire and just gave them that. But then I actually enjoyed it. So then it became, the first few chapters was about the fans, then it just became about what I wanted to write. And and there's some novels like Sword of the Western Seas, which is for fans. The Golgarathia is me, like I'm finishing the story. The Valralton microfiction is purely me having fun with Michael. And the Notaro Japanese fiction is me. Akuma no Dan is purely me having fun. Yeah, so Gemstone is probably, alongside A Limit No Machi and the Ancient Elfish stories, the best stuff I've worked on, along with maybe some of my French stories.
It's funny because a similar thing happened to me. I actually started having some strange heart issues and didn't know what it was. And I went to the emergency room twice, with this, felt like I was having palpitations and stuff, and felt really weird when I was standing up straight for too long or getting overheated and stuff like that. And finally I ended up getting some kind of, interrupted my work, but I did get a diagnosis finally last year, and I developed POTS somehow from a viral thing from COVID or the vaccine. We're not sure which one. But after that, I developed POTS, so I was getting all this heart regulation issues with the nervous system. And it actually interrupted my work career, which I was working in humanitarian work in communities and stuff like that in Harlem and New York City for years. And I couldn't, because of the upright thing, if I'm standing upright too long, I start getting elevated heart rate and also the heat sensitivity. So I actually had to go into a medical leave. And that's when I wrote my full fantasy novel, which is like 620 pages. And I always wanted to write like a fresh, modern kind of, but still taking, like I wanted a new fantasy, like another Lord of the Rings, on that level of creating a new fantasy world or Harry Potter for people to enjoy, but keeping the classic feel of the good old stuff, but also making a fresh new one in this century, So, and I was able to do that while I was on my medical leave. Obviously, it's yet to be seen that it gets that popular, but that's the book's actually done, and now is the audiobook's being released this month, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah, so interesting, hey? Similar story.
Yeah, and you want to know what else? 1980 thereabouts, David Gemmell, one of the most premier and prestigious these early 2000s fantasy writers, had a massive health scare. He was told, you're going to die. You only have maybe a year or two left to live. And he decided to quit his journalist career and just pour everything into writing fantasy. And he wrote a mega bestseller hit. And then he wrote another, and then another. But the thing is, after he actually told someone, depending on, because his story is about a siege of a castle, and he says, it's called Legend. I'm still reading through it. And he said to a friend that apparently, if it is a fact that he's going to die, he's going to write it as all the heroes will be slaughtered. But then he got the news, no, it's all fake. We misdiagnosed you. It's a 1 in 100, and he after he had finished, I think, weeping, he put together a great ending, which apparently won him much applause, and he was a mega success. And, it's a little inspiring and moving just what he went through.
I was just going to say, I think I've read a lot of his work. Didn't he write Echoes of a Lost Song and all those, or did he do, let me just double check this guy's books. I think he did Echoes of a Lost Song.
I think so.
Do you know that one?
Not really. I've only just started reading him, weirdly enough. Josh Tatter has read all of his stuff. and has been pushing me to read more and more Gamel.
Oh, yeah, Dross the Legend. Oh, yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. Dross the Axeman. Yeah, he did. So Legend is about Dross, right?
Yeah, Legend I know.
And then Waylander. Yeah, Waylander, Echoes of a Lost Song. Man, that guy is so good. I read so many of his books. But now I know why they're a little grim.
Well, the first one was a certain style, and then he developed his other stories to be grim because he had a great admiration for Robert E. Howard. But he felt that a lot of the dark fantasy writers and sword and sorcery writers had deviated too much from Howard and was trying to restore heroic and epic and dark fantasy. He wanted to restore it back to Tolkien and Howard. So he had a very beautiful dream. But the trouble is, like people... the genre, despite his best efforts after he died, has kind of fallen apart. And it's just these things happen. We live in a fallen world. Things get better, things fall apart, just the way it is. But I kind of hope maybe in our generation we can put it back together. If only, in honor of him and all the others who wanted it back on its feet.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible with people like you on Substack and other Substack writers that are just having a platform to write what they want to write instead of only the authors that are coming in through the media system and what's wanted publicly right now are the only ones that end up writing because they're the only ones who get published and seen. So I think people probably might have been discouraged and not written at all if they knew, well, no one's ever going to read this. But now you got Substack where people can actually just write what they want and they know someone will read it, so it encourages it even more.
True.
Yeah, cool. Well, you, getting onto you a little bit, so you grew from 0 to over 2,300 subs or something now, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm somehow lucky to have reached the heights I have and to still be growing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then about 106 of those are paid subs based on some posts of yours I saw.
Yeah, something like, I've given like 25 comps or something, and I have like 80 or 70 or something paid subscribers.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I've also gotten a few paid subs like last month or the month before, shortly after I hit 2,000. When I decided to just make it a sale, but I'm hoping to keep it permanent if I can, I reduced the fee for a year subscription to $6 and founding members fees to $60. And this is American. Mm-hmm. No, wait, this is Canadian. So actually it's more like $40 or $50 American, and it's like $4 or something American or something. I forget. Mm-hmm. But it's like $6 Canadian, and which is a pretty good deal, I think. Yeah. I hope so.
It definitely is.
But we'll see if it'll keep growing. If not, well, these things are the way they are.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, though. I mean, I was pretty impressed with that. I was like, damn, I'd be happy with that. I mean, it's obviously not enough, but I think it's probably a lot more than a lot of other people have.
Yeah. So it's like I'm having to be grateful for what I've been given, and especially when the platform that I have is something that is supported by a lot of fellow writers and a lot of super generous readers who, honestly, like, without whom I have nothing. Like, I, no joke, have nothing. And it's
that's
something
real.
That I try at least once a week, or I'm not always faithful to that, but I try once a week to at least tell my fans, thank you. I'm grateful. Without you guys, I wouldn't be anywhere where I am at. I've been invited to submit a book to another publisher. I've pretty much got one publisher. I've now 2 editors. I'm helping to edit one book, and I've got like 7 to 8 books that are going to be coming out this year. Without my fans, I would have nothing, and I don't know what I'd be doing without them. So it's something to be thankful for and grateful for. And I'm also back in school, and I'm going back to teaching because I've finally gotten over a bit of a slump. So it's like, you're grateful for what you're given when you're in the position I'm in.
It's awesome. That's just another story of how fantasy and this, this industry, I guess, or this app kind of saves lives, or improves lives at least.
Definitely does.
Yeah, I keep running across these stories where I'm interviewing people, and it's just like, who knows what they would have turned to if they didn't have something else to get them through.
Well, I'd probably be writing, but wouldn't expect any kind of renown. I probably would have given in to depression and done something drastic. Maybe turned to drink or something.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I would have
Yeah.
Weirdly,
Or as you
out of-
said, at least you had your writing at least, you know? So maybe you would have just done that. But it's still
Well, I would have
fantasy and
been-
writing helping you through.
I would have been writing, but without a readership, I would have been, I don't know, I think I would have self-harmed in some way, so to speak, in a drastic
right.
way. So half of it is the readers, the other half is the fantasy. The genre has
Right.
saved my life and has been keeping me sane and alive since I was 11 years old.
Wow.
And even kind of before that, because I was 2 years old when I first saw The Lion King. And I was in the 4th grade when I saw the Merlin movie. And these things, the Disney movies, the movies like Dragonheart, Merlin, The 10th Kingdom,
Yeah.
Princess Bride, these sort of films
I love that.
changed me. Stories like Schtroumpf, Roland, the Iliad, the Odyssey, like these stories saved my life. Like, I don't know about other people, but I grew up under very, like, I didn't have the best childhood, but I didn't have the worst one out there. But the thing is, when you're a lonely little kid who's not really liked, you escape somewhere. And I escaped into fantasy worlds that I was reading. I tried writing in my early adolescence. It didn't really work out. And I increasingly escaped into medieval literature and fantasy fiction. It's at 17 that I started picking up the pen again, and I started writing ever more, and I've not been able to escape it. So it's been 17 years. And the thing is,
that's a beautiful story.
Well, yeah, the genre has saved my life, but there was a time when I was still going to fall apart, and my readers kind of got me out of the slump. Or threes. So it is a case where the genre has done a lot of good for me, but so have my readers. Like, we can't undersell how much the readers affect the writer.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I mean, it's I only probably have one. It feels like there's only a couple. No, there's probably like a few, you know, that actually really engage and read that I know are really reading my stuff. I mean, I shouldn't sell it short. Maybe there's more than a few, but the ones that are doing it, you know, that listen to these podcasts and that do it, I definitely feel the you know, I have a lot of appreciation for them, and it feels like those guys definitely keep you going.
Yeah.
So I've seen this kind of thing going around where people are complaining or saying that people on Substack are just indie writers writing to other indie writers. What do you think about that?
So we're just writing to other indie writers. Okay. Well, how should I put it? Okay. The thing about that is that yes and no. If you're not careful, you'll just be writing to other indie writers. It's true on Twitter, as I'm finding out again. I found it out the first time some time ago, and I've been trying to get out of there. But what I've been finding is that what you try to do with the Twitter people is you try to leverage them into YouTube. And that's what I'm going to try to do. Leverage them into just giving a few views to a few YouTube videos and a subscription. Even if they don't come back to view it, that boosts my numbers on YouTube. And from there, I get the real listeners. And the real listeners are the normies. And the normies are not on sites like Twitter. They're over on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And everybody uses YouTube. Hundreds of millions of people use YouTube. That's where you go. And sure, you might only make a dozen sales. But that's a dozen sales more than if you didn't. And if you're really lucky, you'll get like 10,000 subs. If you're really, really lucky. But the thing is, it's a good starting point, because once you're done with like the YouTube run, if you have your books in audio format and you put them there in TikTok, what you then do is you move to actual radio shows where you send it to the radio so that it becomes an actual radio drama that they play. And that'll get a lot more reach because you know you're trying to get to the regular people. And regular people listen to the radio in the car on the way to the work. That's what you want. But when it comes to Substack, when it comes to readers online, the readers I'm finding are on a lot of web novel sites. They're all over the place. And I know that because I've been going to web novel sites recently. And there's a lot of readers there. But Substack has a growing community. We got to bear in mind, Substack has 45, 50 million people on it. It's only going to get bigger. And there's a lot of news reporters, there's a lot of writers and whatnot moving to Substack. So Substack's only going to get bigger. You're right now, if you're not careful, you're writing just to other indies, but it'll expand. This is what patience is for. We need to be patient. People are coming to Substack. So what we need to do is build, it's like, how do I put it? let me use a bit of a recent literary example. Pillars of the Earth. When Prior Philip finds out that there might be a lot of people who might come to Kingsbridge, does he just give up and say, well, there's too many people for me to handle? No, what he says is, good, I need all those people to set to work. Helping dig the foundations, I need the people to start working hard on the cathedral, or at least the foundations of it. And the thing is, yes, he could have given up like a dozen times for a smaller church, but he doesn't. He doesn't settle. So the thing is, you could be in an echo chamber right now. But as I've been saying earlier today, we need to break free from this. But it's not going to be done easily or by giving up. But this is why I go to all these different kinds of substackers. Like I go to political substackers, philosophy ones. I go to parenting ones. I go to travel substackers. And I try to read what they say. I make comments and I try to befriend them. And then, some of them will follow, some of them won't. And a lot of them do come over and read. So when I'm writing my essays about fiction or when I put out one of my serial novels, I'm finding that there's a lot of people who do read it. And the microfiction gets views as well in notes. Some people don't even move past notes. So you do have to compromise with them a little. But you also need to, how do I put it? You also need to be patient and actually ask people if they'd be willing to read it. So like, how do I put it? There's some essayists who never get around to reading, and they're quite brilliant. They never really read your fiction, on Substack at least. Like, let me see. I know of at least 2 really large ones who've said, I will pick up the book when it's on sale, but I'm not going to read it on Substack. It's just psychologically, I just can't look at the Substack screen and read a book. But I can. Right. I'm willing to go to the Barnes & Noble, because they're in the U.S., and I'm willing to pick up the book. Okay. And, they've been straight shooters with me, and they've been really kind, and they're like, well, I'm going to restack your stuff. I'll restack even your stories, but I'm not going to read it until I have it in physical copy. Okay. But you see, I didn't, like when I first started out on Substack, I didn't know who would read and who wouldn't. So I went to these guys and I'm like, oh, will you read my fiction? They read it a little, then they said, yeah, listen, I can't keep reading this. Can you just finish the story and then submit it to me? And see, I wasn't offended, and I went, yeah, I also kind of prefer stories in book format. And, but they said, but I can read your essays. I'll restack everything you do, but, but there's also some who they say like, well, they read your stuff. Now my stuff, I'm learning I can't just put it all in one big post. So I'm having to break up my chapters because
right.
It used to be that I didn't have a problem. I would get all sorts of people reading my stories. But the problem is, since some time ago, they've stopped because it's so exhausting for them to scroll through the screen because my chapters are pretty long. And what I've been doing now is I've been compromising with them and starting to break up my chapters. And then I post the full chapter. And I've started doing this also by collecting a couple of chapters and posting it in a collected post and whatnot. This makes it easier because the format is everything. Format is very important. But when you're trying to attract indies into reading, you got to be patient with them. It's not that they don't want to read your stuff. It's that they've got their own lives, and it might be the format of the website. And some, as I found out with Joseph L. Weiss, who's a frequent reader and writer, some prefer to download it into a PDF format or something. I don't know how to do that, but he does. And, he reads it very, very slowly and very thoroughly. And this is how it's done. Like, in my experience...
What format do you use, by the way, for your... I think I could go look at it, but...
I only use the regular format because I don't know how to change anything because I'm tech stupid. I'm tech illiterate.
Okay. So it's probably just I think it's the newspaper format is the way it starts off at on Substack.
Oh, okay.
Where it has like a few things in the middle and then a few things on the sides.
Yeah, I think so. It's just the format. I just use it as a standard thing.
That's hilarious. Well, then these other questions I have for you are going to be hopeless. I'm just kidding.
But the thing is, readers will come. It's a matter of patience, and yeah, you got to get off the internet and go in person to distribute to normies. And you also have to bear in mind how they watch things. They watch things on YouTube, on Netflix, on TV, and via radio. Yeah, radio is kind of dying, but it's still there. And they read on their Kindles, and they read on they read the paperback edition. So, like, there's growing readership on Substack, but we gotta hunker down, be patient, and try to attract as many people over to our corner as readers as possible. But this is not gonna...
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice for sure. I'm learning a lot listening to this stuff. I had some of these ideas, but definitely it's really interesting, the stuff he's talking about.
Okay. But bear in mind, a lot of what I've learned on Substack is I had a lot of people willing to patron me. Like, what I mean by that is they supported my Substack and they would restack everything and they'd support me and debate me and encourage me. But I didn't have anyone to teach me how to market the fiction Substack stuff. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn through trial and error. I've had to trial and error my way through the whole thing. So a lot of when I give a lot of advice on how to get your stories to people, it's because I actually want people to avoid my mistakes. Because I made a lot of mistakes early on, and even I still make mistakes. But when I realize I've made a mistake, I go, okay, people, don't do this. Do it this other way, because I just blundered. Don't blunder like me. Do it the right way. And most people go, oh, okay, thanks, and they go and do it the right way. But yeah.
And what are some of the blunders? Like, I'd love to know that. Like, what would you think is the most serious blunder that you could make that you want to avoid?
Well, okay, so let me see. One is being too shy to actually ask someone to read your story. Like I've been too shy early when I first was on Substack. Now, the other mistake I made was I bothered Morgoth's review because I was a big admirer of him, so I kept tagging him with every post and every story till he just unsubbed. And I thought he grew to dislike me. But then when I went on Twitter, he immediately followed me and said, yeah, I really do like you. But I just couldn't keep up with all those posts you were writing. You were having like 1 to 2 posts a day and those stories. But like, I really like you, but like, I can't keep up with all that. I keep reading nothing else. So then I went, okay, yeah, sorry. So I followed him around like a puppy. You don't do that. You let the man have some space. And you let your readers have some space. If they say, listen, I'm reading this, don't bother me with this other post, you leave them be. You don't keep bothering them. I've made the mistake of keep bothering them. Yeah, because then you just annoy people.
Right.
But you don't under bother them, where like you never approach them and then they go, wait, you wanted me to read that? I had no idea. So like I've made those mistakes. I've also had my mental health where I got too addicted to the dopamine hit from Substack. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like that's very...
That was like me. That was like me when I got my first paid sub. I was like, yeah, So.
Yeah, I was there. I've been there. That happened with me. I
can definitely attest, though. I just want to say one thing. I can definitely attest that it's a really good point that you have to actually ask someone to read, because I actually had read a few of your posts before, but I never read into like any of the serious long stories or anything like that, more serious stuff rather than the ones on the Disney movies and different commentary. But then you said, hey, make sure you read my stuff, one time to me. And I thought, you know what? I actually haven't dug into one of his stories and I actually should, So I actually went and read that. I read the Hercules versus the Hydra story. And that was really awesome. Thanks.
Heracles, that kind of came out of a love for Heracles. And because I realized I always wanted to write Heracles. Because, I didn't...
It feels like Conan kind of, doesn't it?
To an extent,
a little bit.
Yeah. But it's that when I was about 5 years old, there was a show called Hercules Legendary Journeys that ran with Kevin Sorbo as lead. And it was my favorite TV show because it was also my dad's and my eldest brother's favorite show. And I would come home from school and try to watch it. Now, see, my stepdad did not like me. So my only escape was through that show at 5 or 6. And, well, from really 6 years old and onwards. So I'd watch this show religiously because it gave me a male figure I could look to, and who always triumphed. And my dad loved the show and loved the stories of Heracles. So, it allowed me to connect with him even though we weren't together. Because the divorce and everything, and I couldn't live with him for a time. So,
okay.
Like
Wow.
it allowed me to connect with him. So writing the Heracles story was like returning home in a way. The prodigal son had returned to the father to an extent. And it's an incredibly
Wow.
important story to me. So that Hydra scene, that's one of my favorite things that I've written. And I've written the other chapters leading up to it, like him slaughtering his family, there's him versus the Nemean lion, and the story's going to cover the 12 labors. Then I'm going to just publish that as a book, then get to Omphale and the Golgothathiad stuff, and I'm going to then get to the Gigantos and all that. But
Wow.
the other advice I'd say is most people, when they go to Restack, they click, like they restack with a quote. You don't do that. What you do is you go Restack, then you restack with a quote. You know what I mean? So you double restack yourself.
I do, but I don't know why. Oh, okay. So it's a double.
Yeah, you do a double that way because it double restacks you in the notes. And anytime anyone quote reposts you or restacks your post with a comment, you restack what they've done. I actually found that trick out by accident and by observation and out of a bit of greed, because I went, ooh, I could get even more attention this way in notes. You also have to make sure you post at least at the beginning of the day or middle of the day or something. What do you all think of this? You have to engage with people. Answer every comment. I didn't originally do that, but answer every comment, answer every fan question, debate with people, engage with them. But you also have to go into other people's comment sections. You need to be subtle about things. You can't always just go, listen, in my universe, people don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
And you could say,
it's so annoying.
like,
I've seen people doing that, and I'm like, oh man, that's just bad taste. Like, it's not going to help you.
it is annoying. But the thing is, if you say, now, I think this, and as a fantasy serial writer, I don't think I could write something so preposterous as what's happened in this news article. Like if you're commenting on politics or something. Not even in my wildest fantasy fiction I could write something like this. This is just... And what does that do to people? They go, well, yeah, he's a fantasy fiction writer.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is people then go, wonder what kind of fiction it is. So you know what I mean? Like, you make a reference.
Yeah, I like that.
Like every few comments. You don't do it every time. You do it every once in a while.
Exactly, yeah. That's kind of what I do, but you know what I wasn't doing? I was only doing it on... you opened a whole new world to me earlier, because I was doing all these things that you're talking about, except for I wasn't going and finding the non-fantasy guys, like you said, like the journalists, the news guys, the health dudes or whatever, and then commenting in there, because that's like a whole new market circle.
Well, you have to have an opinion on everything.
Right.
You have to have an opinion on everything. You have to explore every article. And I've not been paying attention to music articles, but I'm thinking of going into music essays and looking into those guys. You also have to be willing to ask people if they'd read your stuff. You have to be polite. You have to be agreeable. And you also have to do something which I didn't do at the start, and I blundered a little. And you have to remember, these are your customers. Everybody's a customer. So the customer is always or often right. You can debate them, but you can't argue with them. So you can debate.
Yeah, don't make them wrong, basically. Yeah.
Sort of.
I did Big League Sales. Like, it's a really famous sales book. It's called Big League Sales, Surefire Closing Techniques. And it's I use it to sell hundreds of books and also fundraise over, I guess, $2 or $3 million for charity. It's written by Les Dane, but in there he kind of has a better way of saying that the customer's always right thing. He basically says, like, don't make the customer wrong. So if you end up arguing or disagreeing with the customer and they feel like they were made wrong, even if it's in like a different subject, for example, you're selling a customer, he talks about in a gas station or something, he's selling this customer is the shop owner or whatever, and this other guy walks in and says, how do I get to the highway? And the shop owner says, oh, you take a left and a right. And then Les Dane corrected him. He said, oh, no, actually, it's better if you take a right and then go around the side and take a left. And so the guy who walked in was happy. He drove off. And then Les Dane lost the sale with the shop owner.
Well, what I meant was you can debate with people, but you can't argue with them. And you got to be classy. And the other thing is, I would say, is that I learned this the hard way. You do have to write essays. You do have to write the odd essays and prop up your fiction with your essays. So link to your fiction.
Okay.
And if not everyone goes into your fiction, you at least have them to fall back on for your essays. And that grows you a platform. and a greater variety of people who will look at your fiction.
When you say essay, you mean like kind of like a commentary or a review or something on something else than you're writing?
Well, what I mean is like it has to be related to your fiction. Like if you write essays on, like, say Dan does it on Gallivant, which is a musical from the Twins. Okay, well, he'll attract Gallivant fans that way. Gallivant fans are typically fantasy nerds and Disney guys and Disney girls. Disney fans like fantasy fiction, so they'll read your fiction. It's basically an advert. You got to think of it in those terms. And I originally just threw out all my fiction. Like, I threw out a few chapters on my Substack. Nobody read them. That was my Victor Tempeston story. Nobody read it.
Yeah, I think we all go through that. Yeah.
I then wrote chivalry essays. But here's the thing. Now, to counterbalance my earlier advice, my chivalry essays got a lot of praise, but they didn't give me any satisfaction at first. I grew to like them, actually. And I grew to really like the topic and became passionate for it. But I didn't like it at first, and I said, well, okay, are these people even reading my fiction? And, well, actually, are they even reading my Victor Tempeston stuff? They weren't. So what I then did was I took a plunge, I took a risk, and I wrote on other topics. And then I also I finally took a plunge on writing after a little success with my Gemstone, just small success. And with a bit of success behind me on my Prince of Flames, a few readers on Baron Cub, and a few other stories, I took the plunge on Darkspire Conspiracy. Now, I'm an odd writer because the essays were doing pretty good, getting me a moderate-sized readership. It's when I released the first chapter of the Darkspire Conspiracy that my Substack suddenly shot up. And so I have had the opposite experience of most other fiction writers. But most of them, even I at the start before Darkspire, I was writing, the essays were what got me on the map. And but I I didn't break out until I wrote Darkspire.
Okay, and what is that in brief, for those who don't know?
It's a Norse Lord of the Rings story. It was just the first chapter or two. It's a Norse Lord of the Rings, like inspired by the Nordic sagas, set in a Scandinavian fantasy story, continent, Scandia. And I wrote, what was it, like 32 to 36 pages or something. And I published all the pages right there. And the first comment, or one of the first comments, was a criticism. You kind of made a mistake in the middle there. I got a little angry. I didn't respond. I then looked at where that mistake was, and I went, oh my gosh, I not only made that mistake, but I made another one. So, you quickly fix it. And then, because I said, oh, I am so sorry about that. Here, I fixed it. Can you read it again for me, please? And the person was man behind the screen, and what he said was, of course I'll read it again. And then I got a flood of other comments where people were like, oh, okay, I'm glad you fixed it and whatnot. Or people were going, this is quite good. But it did teach me some lessons in, humility. And it also, all the essays that followed afterwards were ones that were more philosophical in nature. So, you got to think very deeply on topics. You can't go, well, I'll just write, I'll just write about politics. And I'm going to try to leverage the politics people into my Substack. No. You don't write about politics. You go to the politics Substacks and you have an opinion about it. You make comments about it. And then you try to make friends with a Substacker. You try to be friendly to him. And you don't lie about it. You be genuine.
Right.
If you're not actually interested in what he's writing, then don't do it. You have to be genuine. If you only befriend those you really like. You know what I mean?
You can't be fake. Yeah.
When I first started reading Mark Thurac's political essays, I was at first disinterested, but then I thought he was funny. He kept making it funny, and I was genuinely laughing, and I was like, dude, you're cracking me up here. And he'd like my comment and go, glad I made you laugh at politics. And, then it became he read a lot of my stuff early on. I don't know how much he reads anymore, but he's a very busy guy, but he was so freaking funny. But you see, Librarian of Solano and I started around the same time. Solano would make politics posts, culture posts, and philosophy posts. But, you see, Solano was frank with me and kind of encouraged me more to write philosophy and movie essays and history stuff, and not to go down the political stuff. So, because I was starting to go a bit down that road, and I wasn't enjoying it. And he encouraged me to go more philosophy, which is his kind of forte on Substack. And so I went down that road, and I've attracted a lot of philosophy fans. philosophy fans do read fantasy, in my experience. So,
Yes.
in my experience, like I'm just saying, maybe it's hogwash, but you have to do the trial and error. You have to be willing to make mistakes, and you have to ask people. But you also have to keep track of large and small Substackers and be willing to go into their comment section, engage with them, talk with them on every topic. And, like you have to have an opinion on every topic, but you gotta actually make sure you find people you like. Because if you're going in there and you're saying like, you're like, well, I don't really, okay, let me think of an example. Early on, let me see, there was one or two people that I wasn't too interested in, but I tried to force myself. And I just eventually lost interest, and I just gradually read them less and less, and nothing came of it because I stopped engaging. But you see, Librarian of Selena, Starfire Codes, Don Harper Jr., John Carter, Morgoth, Charlotte Pendragon. I went into a lot of their comment section, and here's the thing, I really like them. And, you get to know them better, and you befriend them and whatnot. And you have a few jokes and laughs at the end of the day. And the thing is, I found out a lot of them actually are fantasy nerds. But see, I just go to talk to them in their comment section repeatedly because I like them. And yeah, I'm probably going to have to expand and go try talking to other people outside my circle. But that's the thing. You have to actually go outside your circle. Like, it's fun to stay in your circle jerk, but you actually have to go outside it and talk to other Substackers. You have to try to get to know people. Like, go across the street. But the thing is, if you're like, I really don't agree with, let's say, John Dickens. Well, then don't go back to his comment section. Only go back if you really like what he wrote. And then you just say, hey, even if you say, like, I don't agree, but, this was still a good essay. You have to be willing to say that. You have to be willing to set aside the ego. And, you'll grow.
Yeah.
Because if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you. Like, hell, there's no crossover between Astral and I, another Substacker. Like, our essays, it seems to me, are diametrically opposite. But he liked some of my essays, and he said, I'd love to help grow you, and I'd love to bring you on the show sometime. But see, that was him reaching out to me. Eventually some people will reach out to you, and then they'll just say, well, I'd really like to help you out. So, yeah.
And what I'm getting from this as well is that, something key you said there was you have to have an opinion on everything. And what that tells me is, or at least what I took from it, I don't know what you were saying exactly, maybe it's different, but what I took from that was you have to build your personality publicly. And actually, that's what you're doing. You're actually commenting, and people start to get to know you. And then they become interested in what you're writing because they know you. Yeah,
and you got to be nice to them because, they pay the bills. I'm joking.
No, of course, yeah. Yeah, well, you can't go around being a jerk everywhere.
Yeah, like, the thing is, rage baiting may work on Twitter or YouTube, but it doesn't work on Substack. People don't want that on Substack. This is the salon. This is the lounge. People go into the lounge because they just want to relax. They want to read. They want to have fun. Why the hell would they ever want to bring over the, why in the blue blazes would they want to rage and spurg out? And what I've been finding is that a lot of rage guys are, like, from Twitter have come over, but they don't spend much time here because, well, you can't just spurg out because people then go, like, on Twitter, you get all the follows, all the money. But on Substack, you spurg out, people just go, yeah, fuck off. I don't want to deal with you. You're a grifter. And, people see through you and they're like, you're a grifter. And the thing is, this is something I love about Substack because I'm a failed YouTuber. So, like, I failed on YouTube. I can't, for the life of me, figure out Twitter for the most part because it's just bizarre to me. And well, on Substack, you could just be genuine and you just, like, I like to read the history essays. I like to read philosophy essays. So I read those. I read other lit essays. More and more I'm reading the lit essays. I find it terribly fascinating. I'm getting other perspectives on these subjects. And I'm doing a lot of response pieces because I just say, oh, well, here's my opinion. And, they then give their opinion. Sometimes they do counter responses, which is really cool. And, this is how you build a platform and whatnot. You have to be willing to do that as well. Do response
Yeah, a
essays.
little debate. Little debate is good, too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting what you're saying as well. Like, I noticed the same thing, that there really is almost no kind of trolls and haters on here, like barely any anyway. I'm looking for my first hater because that means that I've gained enough popularity to find some haters, but it's very minimal on this. It's very positive, very little negativity that I've seen anyway on Substack. But Yeah, I have noticed that a lot of the really popular channels are basically kind of like similar to social media type channels where they just have mini quotes, motivational or kind of platitudes and cute pictures or cute girls doing it. And yeah, or there's like seems to be three categories of the really popular ones. That's one of them. Another one is people who promote others' writing, and another one is people who write about what people already know, like mythology or Robert E. Howard, or my experience. You know, whenever I did like a H.P. Lovecraft kind of review or quote, that got like more likes than anything else of my personal stuff. That's just some observations I made. I wanted to see if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts on that. You have the political people, you have the self-motivational people. Yeah, I should pay more attention to that stuff, but I don't pay attention to the self-motivational or like the how to write authors. I write a lot of how to write stuff, but it's from a practical perspective, like, and on archetypes and whatnot, stuff that I know works. And I'm not offering you like, here's how you sell stuff, because I'm still learning myself. What I tend to do with my audience is, here's my tricks on how to write the best possible novel or short story or something. This is what I've learned. Don't make my mistakes. Here's the things that work. Remember your archetypes, remember your counterpoint, and remember to delve into the philosophy of writing and, you know, the philosophy of your world and the ideas of your world and all that jazz. But when looking at a lot of the big ones who are discussing Howard and mythology, I know there's Edgar Rice Burroughs who's often discussed. Howard is occasionally discussed. Tolkien is often discussed. Mythology, I've seen a few. So it's one of those things which I'm glad that people discuss because, right, you know, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. What really gets you going as far as reading fantasy? Like, what gets you excited or captures that re-interest that first got you into fantasy?
World building. The thing is, a lot of people will say, like I've seen a few lately on Twitter who said, world building is unnatural, or it's shit, or fuck world builders and whatnot. But world building is basically you describing your world. So if you don't like describing things, write movies, because, right, you know, you're writing a script. And the thing is, scripts are not books. And the thing about scripts is they are useful, they are good and everything. But if you're wanting to write novels, especially in fantasy, the key is world building. You got to world build. If you're not going to do that, I'm sorry, but like, you're kind of shit out of luck. You're, to an extent, I don't know, maybe in the wrong genre. Because romance, you don't need to world build. There's a lot of genres where you don't have to world build. But fantasy is one of them. I love world building. If a fantasy novel doesn't have very good world building, I'm not really interested. And right, the thing is, I also love good characterization. Like, a narrative needs good, solid world building, but the world also needs you know, like, you need the world to be well structured, but you need it to you need the characters to also be in the center. Like, fantasy is not an easy genre.
Like realistic, likable, realistic characters that people fall in love with.
Yeah, no, I think we need some of that, but we also got to bear in mind, fantasy and medieval literature is stuff that, how shall I put it? It is about the deeds of great men of history. So you have to be willing, like, if you're writing cozy fiction, you're writing about normal people. If you're writing about a coming-of-age story, you can write it about just a regular knight. You look at, like, The Hour of the Dragon. Conan the Cimmerian is supposed to be a great man of history. You look at Aragorn Elisar. He's a great man of history. Gandalf, Frodo. Like, I know the Hobbit, some might say the Hobbits are not great men. No, they are. They're great men of history. It's just a matter of they don't fully realize it. They're great men of history. And the thing is...
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like, and you look at Suikoden, a video game from the 90s. Great men of history, McDowell. So, like, you look at Final Fantasy VI. You look at Final Fantasy X. You look at Breath of Fire 3. You're playing as great men of history or great women of history. It's something you have to be prepared to see and work with and deal with. So, like, how do I put it? For probably like 80 years, we've had no great men of history. We've not had one in our lifetimes, it seems to me. The trouble is many people are not familiar with a great man anymore. And for most of human history, there's always been a great man of history who's cropped up within almost every generation and has reshaped the world. So you gotta realize this is more the norm than the exception. And when I say great man of history, I'm looking at not just like the top 10 that so many historians look at, but I'm talking like historically. Let's look at, like, for example, the Roman Empire. You had Scipio Africanus, you had his brother Lucius Africanus. They were both great men of history. You then had
the Antonines.
You had the Gracchi brothers. The Antonines come later. You had the Gracchi brothers, who were great failed men of sorts. You had Marius. Actually, Marius might be a better example. So you had Scipio, you had Marius. You then had Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar. Then you had decades without a great man. And then you have the Antonines. You basically have Trajanus, or Trajan, great man. Hadrian in the next generation.
Yeah.
Then you got Marcus Aurelius. And, like, you've got great men that crop up, like, and continuously. The medieval period had great man after great man. You have Philippe Auguste. Then you've got his grandson, St. Louis. Then you have St. Louis' grandson, Philippe le Bel. Then you've got Charles V, who's the great-nephew, I think, of Philippe le Bel. And then you've got, or great-great-nephew or something. And you have, of course, after him, you have Jeanne d'Arc, who's a great woman of history. After her, you have Louis XI. After Louis, you see my point? It's like, this is the norm. When you're crafting your fantasy universe, you got to bear in mind this sort of thing. And you're writing about a great man. Your king has to be great and splendid. You're not just writing regular Joe Schmo who's, listen, honey, I'm going off to save the world. Everybody has to do this at some point. Do you want anything when I get back? A bagel, maybe? Like, that would be boring. And you need to balance out the regular people with the great men. So you gotta kind of, like, you know what I mean? You need
that's an interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But I see a lot of fantasy fiction where people don't know what a great man of history is like because they haven't read much history, or they are like, well, I'll just fill it out with ordinary people who go save the world. I'm sorry, ordinary people don't and can't. They do need something special about them. But on the other hand, if you have like 5 normal people who are traveling with, let's say, one great man, there might be something that happens. Yeah, I'll certainly agree. So it's one of those things
I like
where,
that. Yeah, it's a really cool take on it.
Yeah, because your great man's going to be the leader of the party. Like, he's going to be, in some ways, Aragorn is the greatest man of the party. And he's like, Mary, I need you to do this. Pippin, don't forget this. You do this. Yeah. And, like, at the beginning,
100%.
he as Strider. Yeah. And he's getting the job done. Yeah. And then you have Gandalf, yeah. Up until, Pippin and all, fool of a toque. But, yeah, like, it's basically like that.
By the way, I do want to say that there is some probably examples of great men that these days we just don't really hear about too. There's probably some, I could tell you, especially in the Asian countries, there's a lot of stuff going on that we never hear about in the Western countries. I would say that the generals of Vietnam that actually run the country would be great men of history, but we don't hear about their exploits, especially in America because they lost the war against Vietnam, really, and they don't like to admit that.
Yeah, but like for Europe, for Japan, there's not been a great many, and for like, the Anglosphere, there's not been many great men in the past 80 years. But Vietnam absolutely got one, Ho Chi Minh, and its successors have been competent. So we do have to give that much to them. So fair point.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew this one story. I just want to say one story from the 5 generals that, for example, they basically, obviously they won the war against the West dudes that were, and then they end up taking over both ends of Vietnam. And then since then, they've had like about 4 or 5 other wars that we don't hear about. Like China has invaded 2 or 3 times and they fought them off. I think Japan once and Burma a couple of times. And they also did this one thing where, do you know about Pol Pot? He was the like really cruel.
Yeah, I know him. I'm familiar with modern history.
Yeah. So Pol Pot was obviously really cruel and impaling his citizens and killing them and stuff. And these guys actually went into Cambodia, marched the army into the capital, took him out, put a different guy who was benevolent on the job. And then they marched back to their capital in time to fight off a Chinese army that was 5 miles away from their capital. And they got back just as they were that close to their capital and then fought the Chinese off as well. Pretty epic feats that these generals did that no one knows about. Back to your growth thing really quickly. Do you have any advice or What is your system with paywalling? Like, when should you start paywalling, and what do you paywall?
I don't know. I set up archive for like a few months. Like originally 3 months behind and 2 months and then a month. I might switch it back to 2 months. I don't know. My system has basically been to lower the cost as much as possible since we're under hard economic times, and I don't know. I don't really have much of a system with that. I originally paywalled a lot of my stories, but I've been paywalling them less and less just cause I don't know.
Okay, so we've got 2 last questions for you back on the fantasy side of things. One, this is my favorite question I always like to ask everyone when they come on. What was your most awkward fantasy crush? It doesn't have to be a human. When you were a kid or something. From like any book, any movie, any show, or whatever.
My biggest fantasy crush?
Yeah, most awkward fantasy crush.
Never had one.
Really?
No.
No characters you fell in love with or little crush?
Like, okay.
Yeah, like you've kind of fell in love with or had a crush on one of the characters, like Galadriel, or you know what I mean? Just someone that you were infatuated with, an awkward fantasy crush.
I don't really get those. I'm typically fond of a character. Like, I'll get fond of, like, Valyria or Zenobia. But, like, at the same time, with Valyria, I quite like her, but I find her more funny. And Zenobia, I have a fondness for more due to the fact that she brings peace to Conan. But the idea is I'm pleased that she brings peace to him like I am that Rosie brings peace to Sam. And so, let me...
Yeah, that doesn't count as a fantasy crush.
Okay, but I don't really get fantasy crushes, so...
You might be the only level-headed sane man on Earth that doesn't do that.
Maybe, I don't know. It might be that I'm not.
Okay, man, no problem. Well, if you could live in one fantasy world for a year, which one would it be, and what would you be doing?
You mean one that's not mine, right?
Could be yours too, and you could tell me a little about it, or it could be one that you chose that, from any of the famous ones.
Okay, I'm caught. I'm trapped between maybe 3 of them. I would love to live in the Shire.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's what my dad said.
But I'd also love to live in King Conan's court as a poet.
That would be epic.
What I'd also want to do, now that I think about it, is live maybe dans Gallia during the reign of King Roi, because it's a French kingdom, Guillaume II. It's the king who reigns over Gallia after his father Clovis at the end of Brotherhood of the Gemstone. Either there or in Antilia under, well, I can't spoil, but the thing is, I want to live maybe in one of 2 kingdoms as it's peaceful and there's room for a good poet, or maybe even, if not the king's court, live because the king's court would be terribly interesting because you're entertaining the most popular and important man in the realm, and you get to live it up. It's either that or living in one of the dwarf cities southeast of the capital of Gallia, southeast of Alma, which is the capital. Because there's one of the mountains where the dwarves and the Commodians live in general peace, and there's a nice village there. And I plan to write a cozy fiction story of one of those areas, one of those mountains. And it's very cozy, nice. And the mountain elves occasionally visit. These 3 races were originally in conflict with each other, but since the rise of the Chavetien dynasty, they've become very, very friendly with each other. But the food is good. They have a hot spring within the mountain, so I like hot spring. I like them very much. So I'd be able to enjoy that, have good food, and generally, I guess, help out a little with some of the physical labor, while being close enough to the capital to pay to gain entry and enjoy it. So I'd want to explore, but also have a nice home, a nice hobbit hole, so to speak, or dwarf hole to live in the mountains, where it's nice and cool, but it's, it's nice. That's where that's the era and place I'd probably want to live in, the exact period, actually. Because Guillaume reigns over a very, very nice period of peace for a while. Him and his son do a lot to try to guarantee the peace of the kingdom. But his son does live during a regency period. So, there's a bit of civil conflict. But that mountain and Alma aren't really affected by it. So it's...
Sweet.
Yeah, that's probably what I'd want to do. Either that or northeast of Amarant, the city of Amarant in the south of Gallia. Because either northeast or northwest during that reign, because, it's near Vauclimay, where there's a lot of orcs, or ogres as I call them. who they have a rich Celtic style Germanic culture. They've got, you have a lot of bards, you got a lot of storytellers, orators, great master builders, or you have to the northwest, there's some of the best cities and towns, and of course the wine and the maidens, and you have the elf towns and cities down in the south. So there's a lot of things to see. So I'd want to live in Gallia during the reign of King Guillaume. Not the first Guillaume, because that was a period of war and conflict, because he had to fight to maintain his crown and gain supremacy over the feudal lords. But King Guillaume II, his reign.
Okay.
But my world is usually a very violent place, so that brief moment of peace for like 30 years would be very nice to live in.
Yeah, that sounds really nice, that little area you described, definitely. I love it. One thing it reminded me of, too, that I thought was cool from your Heracles story was just how it seemed like a very traditional mythology, the way it felt, the way it was reading. Obviously, the Hydra was way bigger than I remember it, I think, in the traditional stuff, so which was cool. But there was other changes, like you mentioned elves in there as well, which, as far as I remember, didn't exist in any of the Greek mythology. So I thought that was cool how you were kind of felt like you were mixing a little bit of Norse into the Greek.
I was, because you weren't around for my Olympnomachi when I ran it as a regular serial almost week after week. But my Olympnomachi was mixed all the mythologies almost together. And, you had Greek, you had some Etruscan, you had Norse, you had Roman, you had all that stuff mixed in together into a careful little brew. And it came out fairly well. If you want, you can look up my Olympnomachi. I've collected all the chapters and published the whole book in a single post.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I ran it as a serial with separate posts, and finding all the different posts would be terrible trouble. So, I after it was done, I completed the whole thing and I put it together for everyone. And it's more like, the style is more like the Silmarillion. So you could find all the Norse and Greek mythology stuff put together, along with elves. Lots of elves, and lots of dwarves.
That sounds cool. All right, that's it. That's all I got for you. So thanks for your time. I know you're a super busy man, so I appreciate you taking the time for this. And yeah, thanks for your help on this.
It's been a pleasure, and well, I'm glad you joined the fiction community, and that you enjoyed Japan, and that you're enjoying your time on Substack. It's a pretty great fellowship we've been building up over there.
Thank you for the welcome. I am enjoying it, and thank you for any listeners who have listened this far. You, as the Brothers Krynn was saying earlier, you guys mean the world to us, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you listening in. And it definitely helps when you support us, because we sweat away at these keyboards and do a lot of work each week to provide the content. So everything you do is super helpful and appreciated. All right. Okay. Well, we'll end it off there. Thanks for joining me. See you soon on Substack.
Yep. Ciao.
I ain't tired. No, strength of the wolf and lion. Slay the tyrants. All this gold's in my hands. I ain't tired. Nope.